Hey there everyone, welcome to another video. And today in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a fully dynamic and filterable table using React and TypeScript without using any external UI libraries. Now we'll take a JSON array of data and try to generate the headers and rows dynamically. Also, we'll create a filter component so that we can search the data efficiently. Now let me show you what the final app will look like. Now see that we have this table and there are a couple of rows, which is the dummy data that I've created. Also, we have a filter component, which shows the chips, which is based on characters here. And also in the right side, we have a search box. Now, if I type out something, let's say Ryan, you see it's giving the value. Also, if you want to filter based on these chips, we can do that. So let's say if I click on this F and J, it's going to give no value because there's no value present here. If I click A and E, it's going to give the values. And this kind of component is super handy for dashboards, admin panels, or wherever you want to show the table data. And what you have to do, you have to just create a JSON file. I mean, not JSON file, but JSON structure. And you have to feed that JSON structure into this component. And the rest will be taken care of by this table. All right. So without further ado, let's jump into the code and build this step by step. But before that, if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. Thank you.
All right, so let's create a React project now. And I'm going to use Vite, which is very popular module bundler. Previously, we used to use the Create React app, but Vite actually solves many problems like fast reload, and you don't have to wait for longer module bundling. So in order to create a React project using Vite, what you can do, we can write down npm create Vite @latest. So this is the command which will actually generate the React project. So hit enter. So it's asking for a name. So let's actually give a name, let's say configurable table. And now you see it's asking for a framework to choose. So we're going to go ahead with React. And also I'm going to use TypeScript. So here we'll choose TypeScript. Now you see it has created this folder, configurable table, and it's asking me to install all the dependencies. So I'll go inside that folder, configurable table, and then simply run npm install. So it's going to take a while to install all the dependencies. Then you can run the project. So let's just wait for a couple of seconds here. All right, so it has installed all the dependencies. Now let's just run the project. So if I say npm run dev, it's going to open the dev server in this 5173 port. So we're going to go to the browser and write down localhost. So this 127.0.0.1 is the same thing as localhost. So we're going to say localhost 5173. And you see it has created the React project. Now let's just clean up the project a bit. So firstly, I'll change the title of the application. So let's say we give configurable table. And also from the TSX, like app.tsx, we're going to delete everything. Let me just zoom in a bit. Yeah, so here we're going to delete everything. So let's say dev hello world. It's a classic thing. I'm going to delete this count variable also. These things also. And from the CSS, I don't need any of these. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to simply delete everything. Also here, I don't need anything here. Here we're going to do, here, I'm just going to give a height of 100%. Also in the app.css, we don't need any of these things. So I'm going to delete. And also here, I'm going to give some height, let's say 100%. All right. So see, nothing is coming now. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a folder called pages, which would be holding all of our pages. But here in this application, we're just going to have only one page. Similarly, I'm going to create one more folder called components. So here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a component called dashboard. So this would be our main page or main container, which will hold all of our components. So dashboard.tsx. Now let's just write down a functional component, function dashboard. And here I'm going to simply return a div, let's say dashboard. And let's just give it a class name of dashboard. Also, we have to export the component from here. So export default dashboard. All right, so now let's just go to this app.tsx and remove this line and simply return the dashboard component. All right, so you see dashboard is coming up here. Now what you're gonna do, we're gonna create a table. Now if I just directly use, now let's say, let me create a file called custom table. Here what I'm gonna do, we're gonna create like custom table. And here, now let's say if in a traditional way, how do you create a table? We use this table component and we give a t head, and after that we give th, which is the heading. So let's say name, or let's say age. All right, so in order to show the data now, let's create a t body, and every t body would be having some rows. So firstly, I'll create a row, and in that row we'll be showing these columns. So for column we use td, so it would be, let's say, test, and the second one would be my, let's say, 24. All right, and let's just export this component, custom table. Now let's import this in the dashboard. So here what you're gonna do, here we're gonna have two things. Firstly, we'll implement the filter here, and secondly, we'll import our custom table. So custom table. See, it's actually showing up, right? Now, what's the drawback of this implementation? Now, every time we want to create some table, we have to keep on writing this stuff, or maybe we need to copy and paste this, right? So that's why we're going to create a customizable table. So how are we going to do that? Firstly, we're going to define some JSON data that we're going to be using in our table. So how to do that? So let's actually create a folder called config. And inside there, what are you going to do? We're going to say table data.ts. Now, how I'm going to define the data? So for headers, I'm going to have three parameters. The first one would be my title. The second one would be an attribute. Now, what do I mean by attribute? Because when I pass the data from the component, we'll be having some keys, let's say name, age, and all these things, right? So here, whatever title I show in the header, the same kind of attribute I'll be mentioning, which will be mapping to the data. So let's say if I give a title called name, so I'll just give an attribute called name. Now, while I pass the data, so that data should be having a key called name, so that both of these will match each other and it will show in the same way. All right. So let me just create an interface first. Interface table header. And the first thing that we're going to have that would be an ID. So let's say it's going to be a string only. The second we're going to have, that would be our title. That would be also a string. The third, that would be an attribute. That would be a string. Now let's create the headers. So const table headers. There's a typo, table headers. And this is going to be a type of what? That would be a type of table header type. But as you'll be dealing with multiple headers, so that's why I have to mention it as an array. So I can say table header array, and then you define your array. So here you can just give like ID, let's say 1. Title would be my, let's say, name, and attribute would be my name. Similarly, the second column that I want to define, just like I've shown in the demo, second column would be my age, and the third would be my, and the attribute would be my age. And the third column that I want to do, that is the address, that is 3. The title would be my, let's say, address. And finally, the attribute would be my address. So this is my table headers that I've defined here. So let me just export this to one type and this value also. Export. Now, as this is a customizable table, so I don't want to just define everything in this component, right? I want to take it as a prop so that any kind of header or data I can pass. So what you're going to do, we're going to create one more interface here. So interface props. And here it's going to receive two things. The first one would be the headers. The headers would be what? The table header, whatever I just mentioned. But it would be an array, right? Now let's define this props would be of props type, right? But as this is an object, so we can just destructure the value. So headers. Now, in place of this t head, like manually have created, we're going to loop through all these headers and show the value accordingly. So what you're going to do, you're going to create a function called function render headers. And it's going to take the headers as an input. So let's say the table headers, right? Like table header array. And here what you're going to do, we're going to render like headers. Oops. Headers dot map, then header. And here we're going to just return what? This t head, and inside we're going to just return this th, right? So what are you going to do? So here we're just going to mention th, and we're going to simply say header dot title. And as it's an array, so we have to give some key. So header dot not key, sorry, it should be an ID. Now in place of this, what are you going to do? We're going to just simply call the function. So render headers, and you can just pass this headers, as simple as that. Now if I go back to the application, you see right now it's not working because we have to pass this prop from the parent. So what you can do here, we can say headers, and then we can just use this table headers, whatever we've just defined in the config file. Like that. Now if you go back, you see it's showing, right? But this is just the column that we've defined. Now we have to deal with the data as well, right? So what are you going to do? We're going to go to this file and we're going to define the data based on this columns. So how are you going to do that? Firstly, let's actually define the interface. So it would be export type, let's say table data. Now what would be the type of this table data? So basically you see like whatever attribute I'm using here, that should be the key of the object, right? Now if it is a key value pair, then in TypeScript what you can do, we can use something called record, and which is like a generic type, and here we can mention like what would be the key name or what would be the key type and what would be their value. So here what you can do, we can actually give the type of this attribute, right, which is nothing but this table header, and then we can use the attribute. And what would be the value type? Let's say for the timing, every value would be a string, like that. So you see that this is the type, right? Now we can just create data. Now we can just create a variable called export const table data. And this would be what? Like table data. And let's say we're gonna give a name. Name would be let's say Bob. Age would be let's say 23, and address would be let's say US. Let's say. Why there's an error? Age. Okay, this could be of anything, right? So this could be a number or this could be a string. So here we can just say number also, like that. So see, the error is gone. Similarly, I'll create one more. So name, let's say Alicia. Age would be let's say 21, and address would be let's say India. So this is my table data. Now this data would be used in this table component. So just like we've defined these headers, we're going to define one more prop here, which would be the data. So let's say data, and the type would be the table data type, right? The same thing. And here we can destructure data. Similarly, I'll create one more function, render table data. And here I can take the data, which is like table data and the array, of course. And all right, so now let's loop over this data and then show the corresponding values. So return data.map, and it's gonna take the individual object, which is nothing but this individual object here, right? So what are you gonna do? So based on this item, we're gonna show a row, and inside that row, we have to loop over all these headers and show the corresponding value. So what are you gonna do? tr, and here again, we have to loop over the headers. So headers dot map, and then we're going to take the header. Now here we'll be showing the TD, and now TD would be having what? The value. And what would be the value? The item is actually containing the value. So item. Now whatever header I'm showing, based on that, I'll just take it. So whatever header I'm showing, based on that, I'll take the value. So that's why I've just defined this attribute here, right? So I can just simply mention item header dot attribute like that. Now instead of this, if I just call render table data, and if I just pass the data, now I have to obviously send the data from here. So data table data, right? So see, it's working. All right, so now let's style the application, because currently I guess it's looking awful. So we're gonna style this table component so that it looks better. So what you're gonna do, I'm gonna create a CSS file called dashboard.css. And I'm gonna import that file as well. Import dashboard.css. So what you're gonna do, we're gonna give a background color. So dashboard, let's say background color E2, E2, E2. So you see it's only taking this much of height, right? And so what you have to do here, we have to actually give the height 100% to the root element. So what you can do here, we can say HTML, comma body, and then height equals to 100%. And also we'll give the margin 0. So you see there's no margin, but this is not taking the entire height because we have to maintain the height in the dashboard as well. So what are you gonna say? Height 100%. All right, so now you see it's taking the full width. Now what are you gonna do? We're gonna just style this table, right? This table. So let's create a file called table.css, and let's import that as well. Import table.css. So what are you gonna do? We're gonna just style this application. So what are you gonna do? We're gonna style this table. So let's just give it a class name called custom table, and we're gonna style this. So what are you gonna do? We're gonna go to this file and let's say custom table. Firstly, we'll give a width of 50%. And then we'll give a background color of white. And also we can say that border collapse separate. And we can give a border also. So border 1 pixel solid like that. All right. So this is looking like that. All right. So now let's actually style the rows as well. So here what I'm gonna do, custom table, tbody, tr, and td. And here I'll just give a padding of 10 pixel. I'll give a border right, that's gonna be, let's say 0.5 pixel, solid, BD, BD, BD. All right. Also, I'll give a border bottom, 0.5 pixel, solid, BD, BD, BD. All right, so it's looking good. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna push that to the middle. So here what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say display flex, align item center. Let's not actually push it to center, let's push it to middle. So justify content center. Also align items center. So you see it's looking like that. All right. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just define configurable table implementation like that. And I have to make it to flex direction column. So I'll say flex direction column. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a filter component eval so that I can just filter the data based on anything. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a filter component. So filter.tsx. And let's actually define the function filter return. Let's say filter container. And here, what are you going to have? Here, you're going to have two things. The first one, that would be the alphabets. And the second would be the input field. All right, so now let's define an array which is going to hold all the letters that I'm going to define as a filter. So letters, the first one, that would be ID1, the title would be all, and the value should be empty. The second one would be the ID2, the title would be my A to E, and the value should be my A to E. Now let's just copy paste so that you can don't have to write again and again. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy. So firstly it is A to E, so the second one would be my F to J. So here also F to J. The third one would be my K to O. Similarly here also it would be K to O. And the last, not last, but after that I'm going to have to mention P to T. And here also I'm going to mention P to T. And the last one should be my, let's say, I'm going to have to change the IDs as well. So this would be 2, this would be 3, this would be 4, this would be 5, this is 6. Title would be my U to J, and the value also would be U to J, right? So what I'm going to do, we're going to show the filters here. So let's loop over the values, letters.map, and we're going to take the individual letter. And here what we're going to show, we're going to show a div. And here we're going to mention the actual value. That would be letter.title. And as it's an array, so we have to give some key. So I'll give letter.value like that. Now let's export this filter function. So filter, and we'll import that in the dashboard. So what you can do, so filter like that. Now if you go in here, you see it's coming like that. So what are you going to do? We're going to style that as well. So what I can do here, let's actually create a filter file as well, filter.css. And let's style that. So it's going to be my container. So I'll give a display flex, align item center, justify corner, space between, like that. Now what you have to do, we have to give some classes for this filter boxes as well, right? So here we can mention class name, let's say filter box. And here what are you going to do? Here we're just going to give filter box, and we'll give some width, let's say 60 pixel. Let's say height is 40 pixel. Let's say display flex. Let's say justify content center, align item center, cursor pointer, like that. It's not coming, so maybe we haven't imported the file yet. So import .filter.css. So it's coming like that. So we have to give some border as well. So what you can do, let's give it a border. So we're gonna give border 1 pixel solid, let's say BD, 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 like that. And I'll also give some gap here. Let's say gap 10 pixel. Okay, let's give it some margin. Let's give some margin right. So let's say 10 pixel, like that. And also let's set the background color to white. All right, it's coming like that. Also, let's actually give some margin bottom 10 pixel. Cool. Also, we're going to define one more filter here, as I mentioned. So there should be an input field so that you can search the value. So here we're going to mention input, and let's say placeholder name, like that. It's coming like that. So we're going to style that as well. So let's say class name filter input. And what you can do, we can go to this filter file, and you can say padding, let's say 10 pixel, 20 pixel, border none, outline none. Cool. It's looking good, I guess. That's not a problem. Also, let's just give some width also here. So width 50%, the same width as this, like that. All right. So my UI is ready. One more thing I want to do, like whenever I click on this, I should be, like highlighting the element of the box, right? So we're going to do that as well. Now, in order to implement the functionality, the filtration functionality, what you can do, you can use context API, but here I'm going to show like how to use Redux. So you're going to install Redux, and I'm going to save the entire data in the Redux store. All right. So let's just go to the documentation, how to install Redux and everything. So Redux, I'll go to this. Just click on this get started. And if you go to the installation, you see they're mentioned to use this. So I'm going to copy this one. And let's open the terminal. Let's close the server and let's paste it. Also, I'll have to copy this because to bind the React and Redux together, we need this package. So let's copy that as well. All right. Now, if you go to this tutorials and if you go to this quick start, you see how to use it. So we have to create something called store, and then you have to attach the store to the provider, which is coming from React Redux. Also, for every feature, we have to create something called slice. So in this case, we can create a filter slice, and there we can write all of our logic to filter everything. All right, so let's do that. So what you're going to do, we're going to create a folder called Redux. And let's create a file called store.ts. And as that mentioned, we're going to create, let's say, const store, configure store. And here it's going to take a reducer. And let's just export this store also, store. And you have to bind this store to the main file. So here what you're going to do, we're going to wrap this app into a provider. So you see it's coming from React Redux. So hit enter, so it will import automatically. And then you just paste this inside provider and you give a prop call store. And here we'll just import our own store. All right. Now, as I mentioned, we need to create a slice. So let's create a slice here. So filter slice.ts. And what you have to do, we have to define the initial state, like what our state will contain. And then we have to create the reducer functions, which would be able to manipulate the state in our store. So what you're going to do, we're going to have two things in our store. The first one, that would be the actual value, like the rows, and the filter values as well. So let me just create an interface first. So interface, let's say state. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to have a filter. And this filter would be, again, an interface. So let's create an interface here. So interface, filter. And this will contain two things. The first one, that would be the letter, as I mentioned in the filter. So letter, which would be a string. Similarly, I'll be having, let's say, letter, as well as I'll be having a name. So that would be also a string. And that would be a filter. And our application data, that would be of type what? Like we've defined that long back, which would be of table data, right? So we'll just go here and we can say table data and then array. Now let's create the slice, const filter slice, and we'll import a function called create slice from the Redux toolkit. And here you have to give a name of the slice. So let's just give a name, let's say filter slice. And then here you have to provide your initial state, which is this. But you have to create the initial state. So let's create the initial state here. Initial state. And this would be of type, the state, whatever I've defined. So state. And here the first one, that would be the filter. So the filter would be having two things, like letter, that would be first of all empty. And the second, that would be our name, that would be also empty, right? And the data would be what? The data would be this data, like whatever defined, which is table data. But I've prepared a JSON data so that we can have more data to work with. So let me just copy paste the data which I've defined here. You'll find that in the GitHub repository. So let me just change this data to this. There's some mismatch of, okay. Okay, that seems to be fine, but here I guess, let me just delete this first few rows. Okay, yeah. All right, so we'll just provide this data to this table data like that. So initial state is also provided, and here we'll just call reducer. Now the first thing that I'm gonna have will be having some action. Now in Redux, what do you mean by action? So they are just simple functions which would be like providing some value, like from wherever we're calling it. And based on that, they will change the data in our initial state. So the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a set filters function. So basically, like whenever we click on any of these filters, let's say we click on this, any of these things, or also we provide some value in this input field. So they should be set up in this function. So set filters, and that's gonna take two parameters, the state and the action. And action, I'm gonna define a payload action. So this is coming from Redux only. So payload action, it's not giving me IntelliSense, so let's just import manually. Payload action, like that. And it would be of type filter. So we're gonna entirely pass this filter data. And let's open the function here. So here we're just gonna simply say state.filters equals to action.payload. All right, now what are you gonna do from here? We're gonna export this function as well as the entire reducer. Export const filter slice dot actions. And here we're gonna just export the set filter function. And also we're gonna just export default filter slice dot reducer, like that. Now this is the reducer. We have to import that into this store. Like if you see that we have kept it blank, so we have to import this here. So you can say filter, and we can say that filter. See, it's giving me IntelliSense, but let me just change the name. So let's say filter reducer. Similarly, filter reducer. All right. Now if I go to this, now if I open this inspection tool and if I go to this Redux, you see a store has been created, and which is having, okay, we haven't actually restarted the server, my bad. So npm run dev. All right, let me just refresh the page. So see, we're having this filter, And inside there we're having a filter as well as data. So this data we need to show now. All right, like that. All right, so what I can do now, let's go to this customizable table. Now what you're going to do, instead of directly giving the data from the file, we're going to give the data from the store. So what you can do here, if I go to our dashboard, so you see it's actually passing the file as the data. But now as you've like provided the data into a Redux store, so we're going to just take the data from the store. So we can say that useSelector, which is a hook that is provided by Redux, which is used to get the data from the store. So useSelector, and then this hook will take the function and which gets the entire store, like the state. And from here we can just take the filter. Now what do I mean by this filter? Now you see this is actually giving an error, right? So for that they have actually given a solution. So if you go to this TypeScript quick start, so they have asked us to actually implement these two things. So let's just copy these two things. So what are you gonna do? We're gonna just go to this store, not in the store, yeah, in the store, and we're gonna just export these two things. Now, while actually importing this store or the state, so I can say this is a root state, which is coming from our Redux. Now you see it's giving me the option. Now what is this filter? This filter is nothing but this filter, whatever I just mentioned here. All right. So from here, we can just take the data and also the filter. And instead of table data, we can just pass the data here like that. So if you go here, see it's still working, right? Now what are you gonna do? Now we have to implement our function so that whatever filter we provide, that should be stored in our Redux. So let's go here in this filter component. We're gonna create two functions. First, function handle name, and another would be function handle letter, like whatever letter we're doing here, like that. So this is gonna take just the value. So what you're gonna do, whenever you click on it, we're gonna set that value to the Redux store. So here you can say one click, so we'll click on it, and then we can say handle letter, and then you can just pass the letter dot value like that. And let's just take that. So value would be our string. And now what you have to do, we have to like set the value to the store. So in order to do that, we have to dispatch an action, right? We already know about Redux. So const dispatch, use dispatch, which is a hook coming from React Redux. And we're gonna just dispatch this action. So dispatch, and also we've created an action file, if you know, like this set filters. So we're gonna use this function. So we're gonna just import set filters. And what you're gonna do, we're gonna take the existing filter value, like whatever is there in the state, and then we're gonna wrap our collect event or collect value. So what you can do, we can pass an object and we can take the filters, like existing filters. So again, we have to take that from the Redux store. So const use selector state, which should be our root state, and then state dot filter. And here we'll just take the filter. Let's just spread the value. So filter, and then we're gonna just change the letter, right? Value, like that. Similarly, this handle name. So firstly, we'll have to give the value, like whatever is there in the state. So we'll give a value that is filter dot name, and we're gonna use the onChange, and we're gonna pass this function handle name. Yeah, this onChange returns a value which is an event. So if you see the type, it's actually a change event type, right? So we have to define the same thing in the function. So what you can do here, let's go in here, let's take the event, react dot change event and HTML input element, right? And here we're going to simply say dispatch set filters. We're going to do the same like the spreading of all filters, and then we're going to say name equals to e.target.value, right? Now if you see, if I open this Redux toolkit, and let's say if I click on AE or FJ or anything, you see our store is getting updated. So right now it's FJ. But if I click on it, let's say UJ, so you see now it's UJ. Similarly, if I give some value here, it's updating, right? So based on that, you have to create a function and then you have to filter the data. That's it. So what are you going to do? We're going to go to this dashboard function, dashboard component, and we're going to create a function, let's say filter data. So what do I mean? Like, how do you filter data in JavaScript? You use the filter function, right? So here what you can do, here we can just simply say data.filter, and you can pass this function because this takes a callback, right? So you can say filter data. And this will take the individual data. So here I can say item, which is nothing but a table data, right? So here what you're going to do, we're going to take out all the filter values, filter. And from here we can take two things like name as well as letter, right? Let's actually implement the name first. So what you're going to do, we're going to say that if the name matches with the actual value in the data, then it will show, otherwise it will not show. So let's create a variable here. So filter by name. So if the name is empty, first of all, that we're just gonna say true. That means it shows. So we can say name. If it is empty, then no need to filter. Otherwise, you filter the data. So what are you gonna do? We're gonna say that if item name dot, let's say toString, because that might be a number also, as you have seen in the data type, to lowercase, if it includes our name, like whatever name is there, name dot to lowercase, then you just simply return the filter by name, right? All right, so now let's see. So if I, let's say, delete this value, so let's say Bob, right? If I say Bob, you see it's working. If I say Lily, so if I give L, that means all these names are having this character L, so that's why it's showing up. But if I say Lily, so it's gonna show only Lily. Let's implement this filter also. So this is a character-based filter. So what you can do, let's take the first character of every name. So first character would be my item dot name dot toString, to lowercase, char at, and I'm gonna take the first character. And here what I'm gonna do, we're gonna say filter by character. And here what you're gonna do, firstly we'll check that if the letter exists. So if it doesn't exist, then pass, no need to filter. Otherwise, here we're gonna say that if the character actually falls under this letter, right? So filter character, first character greater or equals to the letter of 0. And if the first character less equals to letter of 2. Now why I have done that? Because in our filter, the value would be, let's say, A to Z, right? So what is the index of A? 0. What is the index of this hyphen? 1. And what is the index of Z? That is 2. So we are checking that if the first character of the value falls between this or this, that is, if it is greater than the first character in this letter, or if it is less than this last character of this letter, then only it would be true. That means you just show the value. So here we're just gonna simply say if this is true and this is true, then only you show the row, otherwise you don't show. Let me just remove this also. All right, so let's just give it a try now. So let me just refresh the page once. So let's first click on this A to E. So you see it's working. A to E. If I click on F to J, there's no value. If I click on K and O, see, all these values are there. If I click on P to T, that's also there. U to Z also there's there, right? U to Z also, that's there. Now let's click on this A to E. Now let's say Bob. So Bob is coming. Let's say E, Emma is coming. Everything is coming. But if I, let's say, give something which starts from U, that's not going to come because my multiple filter is already selected. Now you see that when I click, nobody is understanding that whether this character is selected. So let's do that also. So what I'm going to do, let's delete this also. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this filter and I'm going to say that if my selected character and the value in this row, if it is like matching, then only you highlight the box. So here we're going to say that if my filter dot letter equals to my letter dot value, then you show a highlighted class, otherwise you show an empty class. That means nothing. So let's just create this class. So what I can do here in the filter, I can say the filter box dot highlighted, and we can just say border 1 pixel solid red, let's say. Now if you see, I've selected, so it's selecting. If I click on this, it's working. This is working. Everything is working. Alright guys, so that's the video about this application. I hope you've learned a lot, and also don't forget to comment if you have any questions. Alright, so as I mentioned that I'll give you an assignment. So what I want you guys to do, so currently if you see that in the header we have just mentioned attribute, title and ID. So I want you to mention another property called sort. Let's say sortable to true. So based on this sortable, you have to show an icon beside this header, and whenever you click on it, it should be sorting the row. All right, and this should be coming for like wherever you have mentioned the sortable to true, there only it should be showing that icon, and it can be able to sort the data. All right, I hope you'll do that. All right, that's it for the video, guys. Thank you so much.